Hello, book lovers. Today I want to tell you about a book that made me question everything I thought I knew about marriage, tradition, and what it really means to be a liberated woman. But before we dive into my thoughts, let me tell you a story about friendship, betrayal, and the world's longest breakup letter. Picture this. You're a middle-aged woman in Senegal, and your husband of 25 years has just died. You'd think this might be a moment for grief, reflection, maybe some peace. But no, instead, you're dealing with in-laws literally stealing your furniture, and your brother-in-law proposing marriage at the funeral. I'm not kidding, at the funeral. Talk about poor timing and worse taste. So what do? Well, if you're Ramatoulaye, you sit down and write the world's most therapeutic letter to your best friend. And when I say long, I mean this letter could rival a novella. In fact, it literally is a novella. But here's where it gets juicy. Ramatoulaye isn't just writing to complain about her terrible in-laws. She's writing to her childhood friend Aissatou, who went through something remarkably similar. Both women married for love. Both had their husbands take second wives, but they handled it very differently. Aissatou said nope and divorced her husband. Ramatoulaye, well, she stayed for 5 more years, while her husband completely abandoned her and their 12 children to play house with their daughter's best friend. Yes, you heard that right. Modou, the husband, married Bintou, who was not only young enough to be his daughter, but was literally his daughter's best friend. Imagine the family dinners. Actually don't, because there weren't any. Modou basically ghosted his entire first family. Now, Ramatoulaye is writing this letter as part of her healing process, sharing her pain with someone who understands. But as the story unfolds, we start to see all these contradictions in her character that make you want to shake her and hug her at the same time.
Yes! What's wrong with you?
Here's where this story gets really interesting and why it's considered one of the most important African novels of the 20th century. Ramatoulaye presents herself as this new African woman. She's politically aware, she's a working mother, she advocates for feminist revolution. She even rejects multiple suitors after her husband's death, including that inappropriate brother-in-law.
You are a rude, terrible person.
But then she makes this statement that just stops you in your tracks. When explaining why she didn't divorce Modou, she says,
"Leave, start again at 0. After living 25 years with one man after having borne 12 children. Did I have enough energy to bear alone the weight of responsibility, which was both moral and material?"
And later, showing solidarity with her friend Aissatou, who did leave her polygamous husband, she says, "Even though I understand your stand,
Even though I respect the choice of liberated women, I've never conceived happiness outside marriage.
This is where the book gets really complex. Here's a woman who talks the talk of liberation, but can't seem to walk the walk when it comes to her own life. Is this hypocrisy? Fear? Or is it something more nuanced? The reality of being caught between two worlds. What's fascinating is how Ramatoulaye raises her children. She's completely liberal with them, letting them choose their own husbands, throwing away parts of traditional culture that don't serve them. Her daughter Daba has a completely different view of marriage. She sees it as a mutual agreement over a life's program. So if one of the partners is no longer satisfied with the union, why should he remain? The wife can take the initiative to make the break. Daba is essentially living out her mother's feminist ideals, while her mother remains trapped by her own fears and circumstances. But Ramatoulaye's parenting philosophy gets tested. When another daughter, also named Aissatou, gets pregnant, the neighbors suggest punishment, but Ramatoulaye accepts the man responsible instead. When she catches her twin daughters smoking, she doesn't invade their privacy or resort to traditional punishment. There's this beautiful moment where Ramatoulaye talks about fashion and cultural change. She says,
I considered the wearing of trousers dreadful in view of our build, which is not that of slim Western women. Trousers accentuate the ample figure of the black woman and further emphasize the curve of the small of the back, but I gave in to the rush towards this fashion, which constricted and hampered instead of liberating.
Notice that word choice, constricted, just 4 words away from liberating in the same sentence. Is this symbolic? A warning against blindly adopting Western culture instead of making conscious choices? One of the most powerful aspects of this book is, honestly, its treatment of polygamy. What's really striking is that all the women in the story are Muslims, but they're all against polygamy. The book, shows us 3 polygamous situations: Ramatoulaye and Modu, Aissatou and Maudo, and Jacqueline and Samba Dayak. In every single case, the husband's treatment of the first wife after taking a second wife is just appalling, leading to emotional distress, divorce, nervous breakdown, and in one case, even death. This isn't just a critique of polygamy as an institution. It's a critique of how it's practiced within these patriarchal structures that honestly completely disregard women's emotional and practical needs. By the end of the letter, Ramatoulaye has undergone a transformation. Using metaphors that evoke tropical storms and earthquakes, she declares that she is not
indifferent to the irreversible currents of women's liberation that are lashing the world. This commotion that is shaking up every aspect of our lives reveals and illustrates our abilities.
This statement brings together all the major themes she's been wrestling with throughout her letter: the equality between genders, the changing role of women in society, and her own place in this transformation. So what is this incredible book? It's So Long a Letter by Mariama Bâ, published in 1979. This slim, 97-page novella, originally written in French and beautifully translated by Madoupe Bodé Thomas, has been voted one of the best African books of the 20th century, and honestly, it's often described as the first African feminist novel. What makes this book so powerful is that it doesn't offer easy answers. Ramatoulaye's contradictions aren't flaws in the writing. They're honest portrayals of a woman caught between traditional expectations and modern aspirations. Her choice to stay married can be read as weakness, but also as a pragmatic decision by a woman with 12 children in a society that offers limited support for divorced mothers. The epistolary format is brilliant. The act of writing to Aissatou becomes both confession and self-examination, allowing Ramatoulaye to process her experiences while sharing them with someone who has chosen a different path. Mariama Bâ herself lived some of these contradictions. Born in 1929 into a well-to-do family in Dakar, she fought for her education against her grandparents' wishes, won prizes, became a teacher, and wrote essays that challenged French colonial policies. She married a member of parliament, but later divorced him and raised 9 children as a single mother. She died in 1981, just 2 years after this book was published, but her impact on African literature and feminist discourse continues today. This book remains incredibly relevant because the tensions it explores between tradition and modernity, between individual desires and social expectations, between what we believe and what we're able to do. These are universal human experiences that transcend cultural boundaries. So Long a Letter is more than just a story about marriage and divorce. It's a meditation on friendship, resilience, and the complex journey towards self-determination. It's a book that will make you think, make you question, and ultimately make you appreciate the courage it takes to write your own story, especially when, that story doesn't have a neat, tidy ending. Have you read So Long a Letter? What did you think of Ramatoulaye's choices? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more book reviews that dig deep into stories that matter. Thanks for watching and happy reading. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you're interested in diving deeper into this book, I've left some links down in the description. You can use it to grab yourself a copy and keep the adventure going. And if you're in the mood for more great reads, don't go just yet. Click on one of the videos popping up right now that I think you'll love. And don't forget to give this review a like, leave a comment, or even subscribe if you'd like to see more. Every bit of support helps us grow this little community of book lovers. See you in the next one.